Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
What is the truth behind Biden's $6 trillion budget? Well, it's not as terribly exciting as it might sound, because in fact, this new proposed budget, excluding emergency measures, that were related to the coronavirus pandemic, Biden's request would boost base discretionary spending by 8.4%, or $118 billion from the $1.4 trillion that was authorized in fiscal 2021. So what are we talking about? What do you mean only $118 billion more than 2021? You mean that Biden only wants to spend $118 billion more dollars than President Trump did? Well, there's more to it than that, but we've got a lot to break down and talk about. Where exactly is this money going? And what do you mean discretionary? Isn't this all discretionary? Can't Biden propose just a couple $100 billion budget? Well, it's not that simple. We've got plenty to talk about, but of course, a conversation on the budget and President Biden and all things politics would not be complete without
True Chat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, after that introduction on the budget, we're going to have a 2 for Tuesday on Word of the Day here. One is nihilist, Nihilist, a person who denies the existence of any basis for knowledge or truth, which I think is a really good description of a lot of people when we pick up politics and President Biden's economic plan for the country. And then party pooper, Partypooper, 2 words there actually, a spoil sport, especially one who is too tired or lethargic to participate in the fun of the party. So as a listener today, where are you when it comes to the budget? No matter what we tell you.
These are the only 2 options.
Right. Well, or is there a third option? And let me know, and we'll find a third word of the day here, at where? At the,
at the website?
Yeah, on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, let us know.
Send us an email.
Send us an email if there's a third word. But yeah, for me, these are the 2 basic things. No matter what we tell you, you're not going to believe it because you don't believe any facts or the government, or you're just like, yeah, whatever. I don't even care because it's just another political show. Or hopefully, are you somewhere in between, and what word would best describe you? But let us know what word best describes your feelings when we start to talk about President Biden's budget, when it comes to your mood and your feeling, at podcast@thestateofus.org. Send us an email, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. Because I think it's something that's important. I think it's important to discuss the process, but I just wonder, and again, if we got more excited about it and followed it and understood what was going on, maybe we could then discuss it on a level that is better. It's like I was talking to my daughter yesterday. We drove up to see her, and at her work, at her high school, there were students who were complaining, gas has never been $2.99 a gallon before. President Biden's really screwing things up. And she had to go, no, gas has been as high as $4 and $5 a gallon in many places in the United States as recently as 5 to 6 years ago. And they go, oh, really? Well, my parents said that it's never been $2.99. Wasn't this last year? Well, nobody was driving last year because there was a pandemic. Nobody was traveling. So therefore there was a glut of oil and prices dropped. Oh, I didn't know that. So, can we have an honest, good conversation about this where people will actually look at the history and know what's going on?
Well, and it's easy.
I'm excited about it, but I just feel like those are the 2 big schools of thought right now. Yeah, well, I don't care. It's a budget. Or, yeah, well, I don't believe anything you say anyway because everybody in the media and the governments are liars.
So we're just going to tell folks the data, right? I mean, for the most part, we're going to provide some opinion on the data, but we're going to try to at least give you the data. And you're allowed to disagree with us. That's why we want you to send us an email. But Lance, what's the deal with, because I think this is a huge part of understanding the budget, right? Because the headline, and this is, for what it's worth, this is liberal and conservative outlets alike are running with the, $6 trillion budget plan, which isn't untrue, okay? It is a $6 trillion budget proposal. This is really important to understand. We've covered this a lot. This isn't specific to Biden. This is all administrations, right? $6 trillion. But over half of that money, think about that, over half is not discretionary spending. Okay. Right. Excluding emergency spending, okay, 1.4 trillion is discretionary. So think about that, right? And now, Lance, tell us about
a quarter of the budget,
right,
is discretionary spending. 3/4 of the budget, he had to automatically just go ahead and renew everything, or your favorite program wouldn't be funded right now.
Exactly.
Whether you want student loans, whether you need food or education or the military or whatever your pet project is, you're a farmer and you need your money from the government, 3/4 of the budget is automatically written in to fund all those programs, just like they have been for the last 30, 40 years.
And that's Democrat, Republican, or otherwise. Yeah. And that may sound like this isn't a defense of Biden at all. This is as we've tried to raise the alarm bell on for all presidents and Congress, this is a problem, right? Because the non-discretionary side, right, the mandatory spending continues to increase. And so therefore this amount that we're spending on the discretionary portion is getting tinier and tinier. And then here's the other big problem,
and the debt's
right?
Getting bigger and bigger, right?
What's the deal with how much of this, Lance, we're having to borrow?
Well, for the first 2 years of it, because of some of the things we'll talk about, but the first 2 years of it, 50 cents on every dollar is going to have to be borrowed, according to an article from the Associated Press. Now, that is because obviously there are some increased in taxes for capital gains and different things that the president thinks will start to bring in more money, as well as the economy starts to roll and more people get jobs and more people are working, then more tax dollars will be collected, and more tax dollars will be collected because more money is going to the IRS for new agents so that they can enforce the tax laws that we have and get the collection numbers back up where they used to be, because the amount of money that the IRS has been collecting has been going down. So that's why for the first 2 years, you have to borrow 50 cents on the dollar. So that's a big headline, and everybody's going to say, oh, we got to borrow 50 cents on the dollar for this budget. Well, it's only for the first 2 years, according to Biden. And because he has things in place in his proposal that will then
I can jet in,
alleviate and take care of that when we start to see more money trickling in.
So, and the other thing is, Lance, right? I mean, it's important that we note for folks that discretionary spending, right? We've got some big old air quotes here, because some of the stuff in here is not stuff that you would think of as, oh yeah, really negotiable things. That, for example, okay, of the $1.52 trillion that are quote unquote discretionary, $715 billion of that makes up defense. Okay. So now we've eliminated another huge chunk, right? Almost half of all discretionary spending. Well, there goes that, because that's, military. And that's not at all saying that we shouldn't be spending that. That's a different conversation. I'm just saying, let's just put in perspective here. Now here goes another big chunk that for the most part, most presidents don't look at as, really discretionary. Biden's proposing, just for what it's worth, just so people know, a 1.6% increase in defense spending. Okay, so it's going up a little bit. That's a pretty standard margin, somewhere between 1% and 5% is fairly typical. So nothing major there. His biggest area, and this is what's going to get Lance all tickled pink here, is education, right? A 40.8% increase in education spending. But still putting in perspective, where does education fall, Lance, in this grand scheme of overall spending? Yes, a 40% increase, but we have to go way down in the list to find education. at only $102.8 billion is what he's proposing.
Well, you know, if I'm getting $1 and you give me $2, that's 100% increase. Oh my goodness, but you're only spending $2. And that's kind of where it is. So I'm not going to get too excited about the education spending, you know, because I learned a long time ago, teaching here in the lovely state of Ohio, we're going to give you the lottery money from education. And many states do this. And so we're going to have a lottery, and the education is going to get the rewards, the receipts from these. Oh, but we're not going to tell the public in all the commercials for the lottery that they're supporting education, that we're also cutting the funding for education by the same amount or more than what the lottery is anticipated to give education.
We're just shifting it.
So we end up with less money. So don't get too excited about this. I think one thing that's going to get a big play in education is universal pre-K and 2 years of college paid for. But the interesting thing about that, again, read the fine print. It's only going to be that if your state decides to kick in $1 for every $3 that the federal government gives to pay the tuition to a community college.
We got to break down some of the specifics throughout the budget, okay? Things like everything from health to defense to immigration, education, obviously being one of them, agriculture, Justice Department. There's a lot of different things, even though the numbers may not be as exciting, that depending on how you look at it, may or may not be substantial. So there's lots more to talk about. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
So we've looked at the broad strokes, but one of the big ones that's in the budget is taxes. Taxes, folks. Mr. Biden would sharply raise taxes on corporations and high-income households to pay for his plans. The corporate tax rate would rise from 28% from 21%. The top capital gains rate would rise to 43.4% from 23.8%, and unrealized capital gains would be taxed at death with a $1 million per person exemption. The administration is also proposing an expansion of the Internal Revenue Service that would double its staffing over a decade and is projected to yield $700 billion in net savings from tougher tax enforcement. So, raising taxes, Lance.
If you're listening and you're one of those people that want to make America great again, I'll just say it that way. Go back and look and see what the tax rates were in the 1950s, which is the time period I'm assuming that you want to go back to, which I don't think is a very smart idea anyway. But I will say, look at what the tax numbers were then when we were great, according to you, because I think we're great now. And I don't want to go back because that doesn't make any sense at all. But the tax rate, if it were higher and corporations had to pay more, that's when workers were getting more money, people. That's when things were economically stronger for many, many people, is when the tax rates went up. And people want to cry, oh, I don't want my taxes to go up. Yet they want life to be a certain way. And when life was that way, or in their mind it was that way, the tax code was higher on businesses and individuals than it is currently.
Even if we cut all discretionary spending, right, we would still have to borrow money to pay for our mandatory programs, most notably, of course, Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Those programs are what eat up the vast majority of the federal budget. And here's, I guess, where I'm going with this. We can talk about raising taxes on corporations, right, to pay for the discretionary spending side of stuff. But this does nothing for the elephant in the room. We can pay for the discretionary side all we want. And as we just established, right, that's not enough for us to stop borrowing money, let alone break even or even begin to pay back our debt. So here's the math equation issue, right, is, okay, well, we figured out how to pay the discretionary portion, which is great because that's better than not paying for it at all. But the next chunk, which makes up, as we established, about 3/4 of the budget, 25% of that is still not paid for. So we still have to borrow 25%, roughly, of every dollar, right, that we're spending. Okay, well, do the math. We can't ever pay back the money if we have to borrow 25% of every dollar that we spend. We're never going to repay it, let alone break even. And so where I'm going with this is, if you really want to attack a big part of the problem in this country, one of the reasons, for example, that we don't or can't or won't spend more money on education is it's not going to be fixed unless we all individually want to pay, 30, 40, 50% taxes. Unless we want to do that, we cannot fix the issue if we do not address the elephants, right? Notably, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which, as we've established, have to be addressed because people are living longer and taking more from the system. And less people are being born. The systems are going to break on their own if we don't do something to fix them.
Well, and the thing with the healthcare part of this is we spend so much money and get so little in return compared to other countries.
And it's getting worse.
And it's getting worse now. And part of President Biden's proposal is to lower the age from 65 to 60 to be eligible, which then incorporates other people. But then go back and listen to our show from last summer where we talked about his healthcare plan. And he does have in there, the government to kind of work against, to work as a alternative to private insurance, which is partly towards what Justin would like to do. But it's like we talk about the cost of healthcare, and then we look at our healthcare numbers compared to other countries around the world, and we don't get very good care for our dollars that we're spending, and we're spending more and more. So that's the other part that really rubs me, besides the deficit, is we are spending more and more, and the return is less and less. And when I spend my money, I want to get the biggest return for my spending.
Well, and that highlights obviously the challenges with these programs that we've been trying to share with folks for a long time. We're spending Health and Human Services accounts for $133.7 billion in the discretionary portion of the budget. It's the second largest single expenditure after defense. And to Lance's point, we're spending more and getting less. And that's in part because the systems that are in place that are designed to take care of those with the least among us and the ones that are older, which tend to account for obviously the largest share of healthcare, those programs are doing less. So we're going to bleed money over here to try to prop up a system that isn't working and is getting worse anyway. Isn't working, right? If Social Security and Medicare were eliminated today, there are literally probably over 100 million people that would be in a far worse position day one. Okay. So I don't want to say they're not working from the standpoint of the alternative of just not having them, right, is definitely worse. Doesn't mean that they're good. It's kind of like the Obamacare thing that we've talked about, right? Well, people don't want the individual mandate, or they don't want the mandate that insurance companies not deny coverage based on pre-existing conditions. They don't want that to go away, right? Everybody pretty much, we don't want you to be able to deny that. At the same time, there's a lot of people that don't think Obamacare is that great. And I'm one of those people. In recent years, you can blame whoever you want, that it wasn't set up perfectly, that the Republicans stole from it. I think there's truth from all of the above. I think President Obama's admitted that it wasn't a perfect system. It was designed, as this is what we can do. But the issue becomes we haven't yet figured out anything better. So is it good? No. Is it better than nothing? Yes. And that's unfortunately where we've been at with Social Security and Medicare. But as we've talked about, we believe there are better answers, right, than Social Security and Medicare. There are ways to improve them substantially. And unfortunately, it does mean hard conversations about when you retire. Because when they were designed, people were only living another 5, maybe 10 years if you were lucky. And that's not how it works now for most people. They're living 10 or 20 or 25 years longer. And that's a big problem and we have less children, as we've talked about. And the whole system is prefaced on the idea that there will be more people working to take care of the people who are retired, and the people that are retired will only live 5 to 10 years. There's a great episode I watched recently on the explanation of the three-legged stool. And the idea, right, was that you could have a really good retirement between a pension, which most jobs don't offer anymore, your Social Security, and your own personal savings, right? That three-legged stool for most folks has one leg, and it's Social Security. And Social Security was never intended to do that. I mean,
to
even
be
when
a
it was
pension plan
right
to fund your entire retirement, your
exactly
entire living expenses.
And you say, well, what do we do that's better? Well, Lance and I have talked about, there was a great idea that we covered like a month ago, Lance, this whole concept of at birth, we give $5,000 approximately, right, to every American citizen that is born. It's placed in an account that you cannot access until you're 18. You can add as much as you want, but you're not allowed to take anything out. And it's invested in basically a government aggregated mutual fund in the stock market, right? This is good for business because, oh my gosh, look at all this money that we're going to be pouring into the stock market, right? It's good for you because if you do the math on the compounding interest and what you contribute every year, instead of Social Security, right, what you would put into Social Security, nope, now it goes here. Now you can retire with over $1 million in savings, and you can honestly look at well over $1 million, by the way, is what it was figured out. You can honestly look at a decent retirement and not be relying on Social Security. And the big key here, right? It's tied to you. Social Security isn't tied to you. What you pay into it isn't necessarily what you get back out of it. Yes, it's sort of supposed to work that way, but it's not like it's set aside in an account. Instead, it's given to the people that are currently drawing on it.
Or I don't think we're a couple of those people that you listen to all the time who are sitting there complaining,
Right.
and don't have any answers. We've got answers. We've got things that would make the situation better, but we can't get people excited about it. We can't get people to look at it honestly and openly and have the conversation that's necessary to push the lawmakers into making the necessary changes. But we're trying. Doggone it, we're going to try. We're going to keep trying because there is a better way to do this, and everybody would be better off, and life would be better, and America would be a better country than it is currently, and we could do it in a lot cheaper fashion.
Social Security, Lance, is 85 years old. Think about that. 85 years old. How productive are most of our 85-year-olds, right? And I'm not scolding old people at all. But the reality is when you're 85 years old, things have probably started to break down some. Things have probably started to wear and tear. And that's what's happened to the Social Security program, right, in this country. It was designed a long time ago, and it's seen some wear and tear. And it's not necessarily doing exactly what it was intended to do now. And if we want to do something about that, we have to be willing to say there are new ideas, right? It moved us huge leap forward as a country, things like Social Security and Medicare. But they were put in place 85 years ago, and for the most part, we haven't done a lot to change them. So it's probably time to look at them and get serious about fixing them, because any conversation about the budget, we end up talking about 1/4 of it. Instead of the 75% of all of our dollars and the money that we borrow, right?
That are spent year after year after year after year, that are just automatically renewed and have to go up for inflation.
Exactly.
The amount goes up just to keep us at the same level as we've been for the last 5, 10, 15 years.
Think about this as we go into our next segment, Lance. At the beginning here, I explained, right, that if we cut all discretionary spending, that we still wouldn't be bringing in enough money as a country to pay for what we spend, right?
Right.
Flip that around though. If we cut all mandatory spending, we could pay for all discretionary spending and then some and be paying down the deficit. We wouldn't be borrowing any money anymore. So doesn't mean that we should just eliminate them, but I'm saying think about it in that context, right? If that's how much money we spend on these things, and they're not regularly part of the conversation about whether or not they're very effective or whether or not they need to be changed. Plenty more to talk about, though. There's other things in the budget in the discretionary section that you'd be interested in. Things like defense, immigration, transportation, abortion, and more. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
You're listening today. Hopefully you had some thoughts during the break there about what we said, right? The vast majority of the budget is quote-unquote, non-optional spending. And now we get to look at some more on the optional side, right? We talked about health and human services, got into a conversation about Social Security, something that frustrates Lance and I think, immensely, not just Social Security, right? But also Medicare, Medicaid, etc. So what about what else is in the budget? Well, energy and environment. The proposed budget calls for more than $36 billion in investments to combat climate change. I guess, Lance, here I would mention that the budget proposal links clean energy spending to job growth, estimating $2 billion for welders, electricians, and other workers on clean energy projects. Another $580 million would create 250,000 jobs to clean up abandoned mines and drilling wells, the proposal said. I guess the quick thing here for me is it's not nearly enough. I'm glad that it's more than what it was. But, you know, if we're going to combat climate change, it's obviously there's a lot more to talk about here.
But it says in the article that we've referenced on The State of Us, the president's budget proposed signals to Congress what the White House hopes to accomplish in the coming years. So we're talking about what the president would like to do and where he would like to see changes. But as the article says here, quote, lawmakers routinely ignore the White House's budget requests in favor of their own plans. The government is actually funded through 12 appropriations or spending bills that need to be passed by both chambers of Congress and signed into law by the president.
So the way it's supposed to work versus how it actually does.
Right. So we're talking about this, and it's good conversation piece, right? It is great conversation, gets people off dead center, and let's look and see what we need to do about discretionary money, automatic money, funding, budget deficits. But the president really has no control over this whatsoever. This falls in the laps of Congress. The president, be it Biden, Trump, Obama, Bush, says, here's what I'd want to do. Here's my plan. But the way the Constitution is written and the way the founding fathers set this up, when it comes to the economy, the lawmakers have to make the decision and then the president has to sign it. So the president's whole budget, this president, any president, is a suggestion to Congress, and then it gets a hold, then Congress gets a hold of it and decides where they want to put the money, and then the negotiations start, and then the president can either sign it or veto the package. And it's like, these ideas people are going to get excited about or upset about, and it really comes down to Congress. And you'll either blame the president or give the president credit. And the power of the budget is on Congress. And most of us agree on how messed up Congress is. We may disagree on why it's messed up or which side is messed up. And then there are those of us who think that both sides are messed up and that nobody's putting the good of the country in front. What do you think? I know I've just taken it a whole new direction, but that's the reality, right? And we're all about,
we can talk about,
we're all about solutions, right? And here it is. This is President Biden's plan. If you totally hate it, well, Congress probably isn't going to pass it anyway. If you totally love it, it's not going to go into place either because Congress isn't going to pass it.
Well, Lance, you brought something up that I think's pretty important to mention, which we've talked a little bit about before, and that I equally like to rail on, which is, what do we really get for what we pay our Congress people? Because it sure seems like a sweet gig. And you say, well, they get $174,000 a year, right? Which for most of us probably sounds like quite a bit of money. I don't know about you, but $174,000 a year salary. No, that'd be pretty nice.
I've never made that. I've never come close to making that.
And most of us would assume, right? Well, we got to work 52 weeks of the year realistically 50, right? Somewhere between 48 and 52 weeks a year for that money. Oh no. And it's not 174,000 because don't forget, folks, they have a staff, they have offices, multiple offices typically across different places. So just to be clear, all the way back in 2014, and this was actually assembled in 2017, this particular piece. So we'd have to do some modern calculations. But surprise, surprise, when you go to Google what the cost of Congress is, right? It's not particularly easy to find an answer. Surprise, surprise, right? Because they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know that per representative, right? Per senator, per congressman, we the taxpayers spend about $7,500,000 a year per representative. Okay. Now that's their offices, their staff, and them. And we have 535 of those, right? So $4.1 billion annually for our beautiful Congress. And they don't work a full year. It's roughly a 33-week work year that they are, quote unquote, required to be there. They work 8 months of the year. So what's the school year, Lance? How many weeks a year are teachers working?
About 40.
Okay. So if we did the same thing for teachers, they should be making, I don't know, $200,000 a year, right? I mean, probably, if we're going to just pay them what we pay our representatives, because
plus $7.5 million per teacher for room, books, utensils, right? Because you said they get $7.5 million for office, a staff,
right?
So I get my $7.5 million on top of my $200,000 salary.
Oh, because the other way, right?
Come on, Justin, how do you feel about it? I mean, I've thrown it out here. I mean,
I know
it's like, the president's taking a hit or getting all these applauds for his budget proposal, but that's all it is. When push comes to shove, it falls on Congress to make the hard-hitting decisions. The president, that's that separation of powers that we all learned about back in 4th grade, or 8th grade, and then again as a sophomore or junior in high school. Just
to be clear, Lance, just their base salary, our representatives make $132 an hour.
Okay, $132. That's what most factory workers are making today.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, they absolutely have our best interest in mind, because and just to be clear, right, the $7 million is to say nothing of their fundraising, reelection funds, etc.
Well, that's why they can only work 33 weeks out of the year, is because they have to spend the other 20 weeks raising money from us that aren't tax dollars, that are just donations from the money we have left over after taxes, so that they can get reelected to do the wonderful job that they're doing for us.
So the truth behind,
right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. In summary, the truth behind Biden's budget, as rough as it may be, is that only about 25% of it he's dealing with directly anyway. And of the 25% that he's allegedly dealing directly with, it basically doesn't matter, because our lovely folks in Congress that we spend around $7,500,000 a year per person, $4.1 billion a year annually, are yielding us such great results. So this is not President Biden's the greatest president that ever lived. It's none of that. It's to say that I don't care if it's President Biden, President Trump, President Obama, President Bush. Really, at the end of the day, folks, these people are not the ones that you should be blaming for how and where we spend our money, because really, it isn't them. It's the lovely folks in Congress that make all these decisions. And what are we really getting for our 33 weeks a year and our $4.1 billion that we spend directly? I didn't even do the calculations of donations and campaign fundraising, and oh my gosh, a nightmare. So
where does the problem lie? If you want to fix the problem, you got to know where the problem is, right? And the problem in this case is not with the executive branch when it comes to the budget. Now, there are other issues that the executive branch are in charge of, and we can discuss those issues. But when you talk about the budget, it's not the executive branch. It's not the president. It's the legislative branch of government, i.e. the Congress. And I notice we're not attacking Democrats or Republicans.
No.
We're talking about the whole lawmaking body. This is them. It's not Democrats there, or it's not the Republicans there, or the few independents that are there. It's them. It's all of them.
It may be the only profession in the world where one of their only constitutionally mandated job responsibilities, which is to pass a budget, that they can get paid if they don't accomplish their tasks. One of the simplest solutions, one, is to pay them less, because this is crazy. Also, the other thing is no budget, no pay, right? You don't pass a budget, you don't pass it on time. And if you want to get real frisky and add a balanced budget proposal in there as well, which is a different conversation. But if you wanted to add those three provisions, budget on time, right, and a balanced budget, or you don't get paid, it'd be interesting to see how things would change. It'd be real interesting. I think there'd be a lot of bipartisan spirit suddenly behind, let's get this damn budget passed, because I got to get paid. But if there's no consequence, I mean, what the hell? Seriously. I mean, where you name a job out there that you can go get that pays that kind of money where you can just not do what your job says you're supposed to do and still get your salary. I don't know of any, Lance. None come to mind.
Right. Well, and who's out there, if they have a job like that, who's working hard?
Right.
For that money. I get paid no matter what I do. Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. Yep. Not usually. So that's the point, though. I know we went off and we didn't really break down quite as many of the specifics, but at the end of the day, it's kind of, does it really matter? Does it really matter when you've got 75% of the budget that we don't get to decide what to do with anyway, and the 25% that's left, even though the president has ideas, Congress basically doesn't care what the ideas are because they're just going to do what they want. And that's usually a bunch of hodgepodge, 12 different committees, right, that make up the
Appropriations Committee.
So we're trying to shed light on the issues, Lance, right? That's what we're doing here.
That's it. Well, we want to be honest with you. And that's what we do here at True Chat. Our mission statement is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And that's what we've done. I mean, yeah, we can talk about the budget proposal for the president, but it comes down to Congress. And you can talk about the budget proposal, but 3/4 of it's already cast in stone that has to be spent. So there's very little wiggle room for the president, if they get what they want, to spend it the way they want to. And they're dependent on Congress to get it. And we told you that today. And hopefully you can go out and share that with your friends and your family. And they say, well, where are you hearing this stuff? This sounds like good stuff. Tell them it's on this show. It's on this podcast. Or it's on this radio show that I listen to, because we're both a podcast and a radio show. But on the podcast side, you can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
And if you're going to tell them to listen, they should know that new episodes are available Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. Eastern time as a podcast. And on the weekends, you can find us in select talk markets around the country. So check your local talk station. For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.